All right, we got everybody here. I introduced Masha, our product designer, or sorry, product manager, and Michael, our product designer, and then Laura is uh, also a manager at Cloverpop core product. And so we've actually been doing sort of running an internship with some new developers, and so we've been kind of going through from beginning to end how to design a product, break it down, get it ready for a team, manage the team, etc. And so we started where you are now, is where you have a Figma. So I thought it'd be helpful to kind of talk about next steps you could take, which can help you down the road in terms of dealing with developers and getting it built out. So like some of the reasons why it's important to do that is, let's say you're going to go to an outsource company, the less information they have, the higher the price they will charge, because they will be uncertain, so they'll assume the worst. So you'll get a better price if you have things really well documented and scoped out and spec'd out. And then if you do it well enough, if you go like as far as we have, you can actually hire your own developers potentially and have them work for you directly. So you're not paying for the overhead, the profits of an outsourced company. You're kind of getting the best deal. So let me share my screen, and then I will start with, okay. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, so we have a Figma here. I'm just going to briefly describe the app that the team has been working on. Not in much detail because it's not the star of the show, so to speak, but it's basically a tool to allow teams to check in every week and see how everybody's feeling, if they had a good week, if they felt productive. So it's kind of a temperature check for companies, for teams specifically. We're building it as an open source project, and we'll be using it internally with part of our KPI metrics for engineering. So basically, you'll get an email. Actually, we're using a passwordless login. So this is like a login page where you just give your email, and then it sends you a link to get into the system. This is the email you get. The first page you see is kind of ideas of how did your week go? Was it sensational or was it hectic? Or you can enter your own word. And we're also going to allow people to select a meme. This is going to make it so that my son actually thinks that I'm doing something halfway cool. First product ever worked on that had a meme. So anyway, kind of like yours, kind of map through the different flow, and so on and so forth. So I won't go too far into it, but that's just kind of what we have done from a Figma, which I don't think is a whole lot different than what you have. So the first thing that we did in terms of turning Figma into going down the path to getting ready for developers is we created what we call a dictionary. So we just basically took screenshots of every page in the Figma and we gave it a name. We thought about the names really hard because we want the names to be like a dictionary. Like when you say the emotional selection webpage, everybody knows what that is. It's descriptive, it's very clear, and ideally you'll have the software people actually use those names in the code. And that way when people are talking across different departments, whether it be customer success to engineering, everybody knows what you're talking about. It's always a disaster, or it's an overhead, not a disaster, but it's overhead when one part of the company has a different word for the same thing as another part. It's a very basic document. It has a brief description of what each section does and a screenshot. So you can just easily go through it, and it kind of storyboards out your Figma a bit. Okay. And after the fact, we, from the dictionary, we go into deep dive into each page, each dictionary entry. And when we say leak to requirements, that's a dedicated document for this specific section. So I'm going to go into one just to show you what that looks like. So this is actually much, much longer, and it has like more variations. We also link to the Figma from it, but anything that can't really be described really well in the Figma, we go into detail here. Like one example is the page before, actually, let me just close this out. One sec. Where was I? Zoom has this talent of always like going where you don't, having the bar go where you don't need it. Let's see, I think if I click on this, no. Okay. Like on this page, for example, where did we get all these words from? Like we actually will, they're a subset of all these that we actually researched. Masha went and did some like research on what are the top adjectives for work states. And she also tested them against what would be in the meme service, Giphy, you know, like if something doesn't come up with a decent meme, then we don't need it, right? We want to make sure that the user can have a good selection there. And we go into just more granular detail on everything. We also have an email, but anyway, I should need to stop myself from going into too much detail because obviously this is a big picture sort of thing. So actually, let me kick it over to Mike a little bit, because Mike, he did the Figma designs, but he also worked a lot on making the requirement documents. Mike, I'm just kind of curious, what was that like? And did you have any like words of wisdom on how to approach that coming from Figma?
Yeah, so I think there's like a number of different things to consider when you're kind of moving from Figma to requirements. I think the first and foremost aspect is like looking back at how you ran or did your design originally. So like if you had very kind of deliberately and painstakingly made every component and already kind of gotten everything into the exact shape and style you expect the developers to make it, you like almost like did an agile development process for your design in a way. You kind of would have component pages and a lot of like specific content ready to go. Like they might be able to directly just copy the CSS and make it happen. More realistically, I would imagine it's like, and this is what we did for our project, is we kind of designed in a sprint, about maybe a month and a half of like just research and designing, and then back and forth and reiterating. So our Figma file has a lot of different pages where you can kind of see the evolution of the product over time and basically kind of responding to needs and what people are thinking. That kind of layout is like what you'll end up with if you like build in a sprint, which I didn't look into like the organization of like how you had your pages and things built. But realistically, if you're building from kind of a less organized document, it's good to build a style guide alongside your requirements. And that style guide, you can, as you build out requirements and start to get feedback from your developers, you can begin to really very specifically discuss like this. I can actually share my screen.
Yeah, go ahead.
So with a style guide, it's like it's like an accompanying document. You can really get into the like very close specifics of like what formatting we're going to use, what kinds of font are used in the Figma, and realistically, if you built rapidly, you might be able to like trim down and kind of reapproach how you'll like build design. But yeah, just information as far as like what kind of screen did you design it on, what the layout is, how that's going to adapt or change if the product's being used on a different type of device or screen. This information can save a lot of time. I did not build a mobile version of the whole product, but I did provide some screenshots of kind of roughly what this is going to look like, say on an iPad or a portrait mode tablet. And then really getting into specifics, like these are the colors we use on the product. These are the different kind of colors we use with different elements, like the word bubbles that you've seen earlier. And then very specifically buttons. This information can be pulled from Figma, which I'll show you. But like just having a document for developers so that like you're just like, honestly, it's reducing the back and forth that could happen, because there should be a resource for them to directly access in these events. So like when you're paying people, that could probably save you time, which would be obviously number one. So yeah, that's just kind of like what the style guide does to accompany the requirements. Looking back at requirements themselves, then you don't have to, you can use this page to specifically say, this is what I want the product to do at this point in time. But you don't have to spend your time here going, okay, this bar is going to be X number of pixels wide and have these characteristics. They can kind of, the style guide is kind of like the back pocket for like all of that extra content and information. Thankfully, if you are developing alongside that and kind of putting it together, you can build the style guide like an initial version and then kind of beef it up as the project goes and developers ask more questions. So that's what we've been doing in this case. Is I kind of got the initial content out there and how the style guide works. And now like all of the specialty components and other things, I'm going back through and making sure during the whole process of iterating and rebuilding a bunch of times that something didn't get messed up or off proportion. And then I'm creating an actual, I'll show you the Figma, an actual like guide stuff page where the like pure version of different elements just kind of sit. And this is just kind of a way to adapt in the event that you've built so rapidly that you don't already have like a design, like a design system built out, like a full, every component is organized and has all of their different things. Like, so for instance, in this case, like this is a componentized slider bar with 10 variants. Pretty much every element from the entire product would eventually be organized in some kind of format like this. I don't know, based on your experience or how quickly you built, whether that you had kind of done that from the beginning. But if not, this is kind of like the time when you can go back and make sure that stuff's there. So it's like a style guide and requirements kind of play off of one another in a way. And I think it can be useful to understand like how each are being used so that you don't put extra detail and requirements that aren't needed, that may or may not be used later. Because like that's the other thing. Some different elements or things that we've built on Figma don't necessarily, when you go to program them or code them in like reality, it doesn't always go exactly as planned. So sometimes we have to adapt or redesign or make changes. And so that not necessarily having gone from like the very core and like done an agile design process kind of saves us in the sense that like we're very flexible now to like go in, like we realize we have to use we're using the Giphy API and we have to attribute to Giphy, like the powered by Giphy, whenever we utilize that product. Was very kind of quick to just jump in and make those kinds of revisions, because a lot of this, like this panel has not been like added to the design like library per se. But I don't know if that's kind of helpful. I hope it is.
I think so. Can I just
Okay.
ask a couple questions to make sure
Absolutely.
so I'm not I'm not really a developer. I haven't really spent too much time with all of these things. So I did just a little bit of research to kind of get a grip on it. And some of these things are ringing a bell. So maybe I was looking
Okay.
into the right things. I don't know. But one was the style guide. Um, is something that a lot of people offer online, like some kind of model that you can start working with? Is that right? Where they have all the buttons and the you can like edit these things. Is that the right idea?
Are you talking about like kind of like a template or a layout, or are you talking
Yeah,
about
a template.
oh, okay. So there are different templates for style guides. The one that we are using here, I contacted Ron and got the Cloverpop kind of layout for the design system and the style guide. I used it specifically because it was with like the intention that the interns are then working with something that's kind of more familiar with what they would run into internally. But yeah, there are it's like there's a universe of different ways that you can put together style guides and arrange that. I don't know. I feel like this is maybe better from developers' minds. Do like I like the really flashy, beautiful layouts for the style guides are kind of impressive and good. Like I would like to see on like maybe my portfolio. But I wonder from like the developer's perspective, do you like seeing things more kind of like how we have them here, like Cloverpop style? I guess.
Yeah,
What are you?
actually, pretty much all like big companies that are well branded have a style guide, and some of them you can find online. It's almost like a press kit. Um, and they will give it to like vendors, strategic partners that are doing creating materials for them, like a design company, but pretty much it comes standard. If you hire a professional designer to come in and kind of design you an application, like one of the deliverables should be a style guide that can be handed off to the software team.
Yes, I think it's just kind of, I would say it's very normal to have one in one shape or form. It's just kind of like the format is very up for kind of what you think is most useful.
Yeah, you could probably Google like style guides and see what comes up, particularly if there's any companies that you like their branding or it's kind of a little similar to yours, you can see if there's anything available.
Yeah, I was just
There's
I was just
also,
curious that we were talking about the same thing. I think I mean, that's kind of essentially what I did. I just picked one and I kind of copied and pasted and just kind of went from there, uh, to be honest. And then the components thing, that was the interesting part too. So the components bits, you recommend that being like, there's no screen that's like an individual screen, but there are components that are, placed throughout the application.
Mike, you there? I mean, it froze up. Yeah, I think his internet. Oh yeah, he said he just sent me a message. He said his computer froze, so we'll wait for him to come back. But
Okay.
anyway, that's what I recall him saying, and that's what it looked like he had done. And then one thing that like the difference between like Figma and the real world when engineers start coding stuff, like there's basically how a lot of software works. Most of it is they'll actually get a library that like a particular drop down that like let's say you want a drop down where you can select multiple things. There's going to be a component that they're going to use that they can skin. If you ever ask someone a developer to create something like that from scratch because it's really, really, really different than what's normal, you get into all sorts of problems. And so you always want to like have a dialogue with your engineers about, hey, is there anything about this design that's tricky or hard? And have that dialogue. It's because the bad thing is if it's hard and then they don't say anything, they just go and do it and they waste like a week on something that's not important. Like that, you don't like that. So Mike, you
my
back?
apologies, my computer froze at like the most opportune time as is tradition. Um, So I was going to share my screen and talk about some particular components, but I don't think that I'll be able to access it quite in time. I'm gonna try to restart my computer. I did want to add, I don't know exactly specifically what Roger said, but a lot of the components, when you lay them out and isolate them, you want to, it's mostly you start from like the bottom up in terms of like what's reused constantly and what's maybe super special and only used once. So like specific buttons or labels that come up all the time. If you go ahead and create style guide points for those or requirements, it then kind of really streamlines a lot. Whereas like then like later on, I would go in and start adding like the very special and specific like stylized components, like say like the Giphy panel or things like that, where that are only used on like a limited number of screens.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Of course.
Oh, you're muted, Mike. Or Roger.
Sorry about that. Get back on the soapbox. So if you're going to go the outsource route, I think the requirements is enough, and that will really give you the best price, because it'll really show them that there's not a lot of work to figure out what has to be done, and then they can focus internally on how and who, how it gets broken down and who does it. Now, if you decide to hire devs directly and build this yourself, then what you'll want to do is go from requirements down to stories. We use Jira. There are multiple issue tracking programs out there. Linear.app is one that's pretty good. It's simple. Let's see, Pivotal Tracker we used to use. It's kind of old. Let's see, I think, well, there's a bunch of others, but we decided to use Jira because it's free, up to 10 people. So it's and it's very mature, and a lot of developers are used to it. So anyway, we had Masha do quite a bit of breaking down the requirements documents into stories. Masha, I was wondering, do you have any examples of like stories that are, you came up with that you could share?
Sure. Let me share my screen. My screen, guys?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So once you have your requirements, you can break them up into small developer tasks and organize them into a project. Like Roger already told you, we use Jira to plan, track, and manage our software development project. It's one of the most popular tools out there, and it's free for small teams of up to 10. To be able to use Jira for your project, you need to create and set up a Jira account first. I'm going to send you a link to the Jira Getting Started guide so that you can sign up for your Jira account and create your first Jira project. This is basically a step-by-step guide that is super easy and you can follow, and you'll be set up and ready to go in no time.
Okay, so just to give you an idea of how we normally do this, let's go back to our dictionary of pages for a second. Here you can see a list of all the pages that our application has. What we would normally do is would first create an epic for a page in Jira. For example, as you can see here in our dictionary of pages, our application has a page named productivity check. So we would go to our Jira project and create an epic named productivity check. To do that, I would normally go to the productivity check Google Doc with requirements that you already have by this time. I would just copy this high level information with the description of the productivity check page. I would then go to our Jira project and create our epic. I would hit this create button. I would say that we are creating an epic by selecting this epic option here. And then I would just paste our description, high-level description of the productivity check page into this description dialog box. And then I would normally just hit create. I'm not going to do that right now because we already have this epic in our Jira project. So once you have an epic, you can add a bunch of stories with all the details of that describe the productivity page to this epic that you just created. So stories will live inside an epic. An epic is like a folder used to organize page-specific developer tasks. And stories are basically tasks for the development team. So in our example, I would add a story named create productivity check page to our epic. I would go through the same process that I just showed you to create an epic. I would, just hit this create button at the top, and then I would just select story here, and I would go back to the requirements document and just copy this description of the productivity check page with all the screenshots and like more detailed explanations. I would then go back to the Jira project and paste this description with screenshots to the description field here. I would then hit create, and this is what you will see. You will this is how you add a story to your epic. I would normally call this story a sub epic because I would want to add child stories to this epic. And child stories, in our case, would instruct developers on how specific interactive elements that we have on this productivity check page are supposed to work. For example, in our case here, we have 3 interactive elements on our productivity check page: the slider bar and a couple of buttons. This next button, this back button, and this next button. So I would add 3 child stories to this sub-epic parent story. And each child story would instruct developers in how one specific interactive element on this page is supposed to work. For example, I would add a child story that would detail how a slider bar is supposed to work. And then I would add a child story instructing developers how the next button is supposed to work. And finally, I would add a child story that explains to developers how the back button is supposed to work. So this is basically how we normally organize developer tasks in our project.
Just to add a few reasons why we do this. So when the developers actually write code, it gets linked to these stories. And so it's like a system of record of exactly what gets done to do specific things. Now, if you have like senior developers on your team, a lot of them will be able to spend time doing this sort of thing. They're used to it. But the more you can do to set the less work that they have to do like this, the more they can actually code. So I think I found personally that if you have a really good, what we call story curation, where you're breaking down the task, so they don't have to think so much about what they have to do. They don't have to figure that out. They can just worry about the execution of it. They'll go like 2 or 3 times faster than if they're always wondering, oh man, what I don't understand, what's this page supposed to be doing? And then having to go back and ask somebody, etc. So it's a little bit more in the weeds than you probably need to if you have a management layer, experienced management layer already in place, like a outsource company. But if you have developers working for you directly, you'll definitely need to do it if they're not like really experienced guys. And even if they are experienced, if you do some of this, it will help them go faster. So. I think you're on mute.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so this is basically it from me, and maybe you guys have questions that I could answer.
Thank you, Marcia. I was just going to say that I was speaking with Ben Munge. I'm not sure if you know Ben through Roger or through
Jason?
Jason. He's a senior developer, and he expressed to me when I was kind of starting getting this off the ground that the best thing I could do is have as much fidelity as possible. And I think this is exactly how I kind of get that fidelity. So this was excellent. You know, this really, you know, if I can get all this mapped out, then I just pass it off to a team, you know. So
one other, it is like a formidable amount of work. But one value is another value. There's always a certain percentage of design bugs that you're going to have. I mean, even the very best designers in the world, you know, for Apple, whoever, they don't think out all the edge cases. But when you're kind of forced to go into so much granular detail on every single damn thing, you will yourself say, oh wait, what about this? You know, and the faster you come across and solve those things, the better. Because if you wait until after the code's written, the cost goes higher and higher and higher. So anyway, it not only will speed things up, but you'll also have less bugs when it releases, design bugs at least, which, you know, are normal. Even the best designers aren't perfect their first time around. So. Cool.
Yeah, I was gonna throw into that just real quick, kind of from like the UX side of things. A thing you can do if depending on how you had built originally, one way you could kind of go back and try to fish out some of those edge cases is to kind of think of 2 or 3 personas or people or types of users that maybe have the same end goal, but maybe different motivations and reasons for wanting to do it, and kind of create a storyline or a user flow of like how they would, you know, in a hypothetical situation, interact with the product. And then you might find that those stories or those user flows kind of diverge or converge at different points, and it might give you a interesting perspective on how different parts of the app will work depending on how people use it. So it's like usually that's like way at the beginning in the research phase, but you can always bring that back up and utilize it if you're trying to get fresh perspective on like, you know, potential like issues or like outlying, use cases that might cause a problem. So.
Let me also just show you one more element of the puzzle piece here, which is processes. So aside from like stories, requirements, there's also like how should development be done? And so like we produced a workflow of, what happens from the design phase all the way down to a QA tester to it being pushed to production. So this is like something that I put together for the intern group. If you have a more mature product, it tends to be longer and more complex. Or if you're in the fintech and you have a lot of security problems or concerns, But this is also a good thing to get someone like an engineering manager to help put together when you're running a team. So there's other things like that, but I won't get into the details of it necessarily, because I assume you won't go that far down the rabbit hole. Although
I don't know, man. I go pretty deep down these rabbit holes. I've been down a lot of rabbit holes these past few months.
All right. Well, hit me up if you need something like this. I'll be happy to provide it. I think I also put something like this together for Jason back in the day when he was starting out. So.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate all of you taking the time, and Roger, I don't know if I can have a couple more minutes, but I was curious about outsourcing some of this work or trying to look for a team. If you had anything for that.
Yeah, sure. I think we could maybe talk about it offline, and like a lot of it will depend on well, there's two big variables, or three. One is cost, one is the speed, how fast you need to have something developed. The other thing is like the quality, like if you spend, you can have two of the three, right? Price, quality, or speed. Like if you go super fast and you release very quickly and you don't pay a lot of money, there's a very good chance that you'll have to throw away that code if it does take off, because it'll be too brittle. It won't have a foundation. If you can take your time, you can have a quality product on a budget, but it can take a long time. Or you can have the quality and the speed, but it can be expensive because you get a bunch of rock stars to come in and build it. So I think like a lot of it depends on your financing picture, and also some of it's your market. What are the demands on getting it out quickly versus going at a slower pace. So, but anyway, yeah, we can maybe connect, down the road, and I'll be happy to, connect you with people I know based on what you're looking for.
Yeah, I'll send you an email and I'll just give you the details.
Perfect. Great. Big thanks to my team here for doing a great job showing Justin the ropes.
Much
Yeah,
appreciated.
and they actually explained it way better than I could have, because like I'm not a designer for one, but also I kind of forget. I'll like go to the complex part because I'm too used to it on the stories. So Masha was really good. Like it really explained it in a very simple way. So good work, everyone.
Yes, thank you all very much for your time and explaining that. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, our pleasure. Good luck to you, Justin. We'll talk to you
All
later.
right, y'all have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you. Bye.